In light of the evidence, I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiff, Miss Williams. The judge's words echo through the suddenly silent courtroom. I can't move, can barely breathe. After months of being dismissed, invalidated, and mocked, someone with authority has finally acknowledged what I've known all along. I was wronged. Across the room, Carol's perfectly composed mask slips for the first time. Her manicured hand trembles slightly as she reaches for her water glass. Beside her, my father's head drops into his hands, the full weight of his wife's betrayal finally sinking in. $8,000. The sum that represents 2 years of late nights, aching feet, and forced smiles as I waited tables. The money that was supposed to be my ticket to nursing school to fulfill the dream my mother and I had shared before cancer took her when I was 10. The future that Carol casually stole and spent on her son's extravagant wedding without a second thought. As the judge continues detailing Carol's financial misdeeds, I think about the journey that brought me here, from a frightened teenager to someone who fought back. I never imagined I would take my family to court, but then again, I never imagined my stepmother would steal my college fund either. Some victories come with a price, but as I sit here watching justice unfold, I know this was a battle worth fighting. 3 months earlier, you did what? My voice cracked as I stared at Carol across our kitchen table. The world seemed to tilt beneath me, reality shifting like quicksand. Carol's perfectly manicured nails tapped rhythmically against your coffee mug, her expression calm, too calm. I used it for the wedding, she said with a dismissive shrug. Luke needed help with the cost, and it's family money. You'll get over it. Family money? The words came out strangled as blood rushed to my face. That was my money. I worked 2 years waiting tables to save for college, Carol. You said you'd invest it for me. She took a measured sip of coffee. And I did. I invested it in something important, your brother's wedding. Her son. Not my brother. Luke wasn't even pretending to care about the fallout. His dream wedding with its ridiculous venue and flower arrangements that probably cost more than my tuition was apparently far more valuable than anything I could have planned for myself. Flashback. My mother's dream. Mom and I used to flip through nursing school brochures together when I was 9, just before she got sick. Nurses change lives, Emma, she'd tell me, her eyes bright with a mix of pride and hope. They're the heart of healthcare. When the cancer diagnosis came, it was nurses who guided us through those terrible final months with compassion and dignity. After she died, those childhood conversations became sacred memories, and nursing became more than a career choice. It was my connection to her, a promise I had made at her bedside. I'll do it, Mom, I'd whispered as she slept, exhausted from treatments. I'll become a nurse. The kind that makes you proud. My father retreated into grief after her death, becoming a shell of the man he once was. When Carol entered our lives 2 years later, I was desperate for some semblance of normalcy, for someone to fill the gaping hole Mom had left. But Carol made it clear early on that her priorities were her biological son Luke and herself. I became an afterthought, someone to nod at during dinner, but not worth investing in. At home, the confrontation. My blood boiled as Carol stood there, utterly unapologetic about stealing my future. Before I could respond, my father walked into the kitchen, coffee in hand. What's all this yelling about? He asked, his eyes darting nervously between us. Even after 7 years of marriage to Carol, he still walked on eggshells around conflict, preferring peace at any price, even if that price was paid with my happiness. Ask Carol, I snapped. She spent my college savings on Luke's wedding. My name is Emma Williams, and I'm 19 years old. For as long as I can remember, my stepmother Carol has been the dominant force in our house. My dad, once a confident man with opinions of his own according to old family photos, now deferred to her on everything from dinner choices to financial decisions. I don't understand, my dad said, scratching his head as Carol breezed past him, clearly done with the conversation. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know until now, I said, my voice trembling. She said she'd invest the money for me, but she spent it all on Luke's wedding. He frowned, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. He hated confrontation, a trait that had only gotten worse since Mom died. Carol knew it and exploited it regularly. I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding, he said weakly. Let me talk to her. A misunderstanding? My voice rose in disbelief. Dad, she admitted it. She doesn't even think she did anything wrong. My father had no answer. He muttered something about needing to get to work and disappeared upstairs, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. Later that night, I overheard them arguing in their bedroom, a rare occurrence since my father usually capitulated immediately to keep the peace. We could help her, my father said, his voice uncharacteristically firm. We have savings. Those savings are for our retirement, Carol replied coolly. Besides, she's young. She can take out student loans like everyone else. Why should we sacrifice our future for hers? Our future, not my future. The division couldn't have been clearer. In my room, decision that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my anger crystallized into resolve. The glow in the dark stars my mom had put up when I was 8 still dotted my ceiling, faded now, but still visible in the darkness. Mom would never have let this happen. She would have fought. I wasn't going to let Carol get away with this. That money was mine, and if my father wouldn't fight for me, I'd fight for myself. I thought about how Carol had come into our lives when I was 12, all designer clothes and perfect makeup, presenting herself as the solution to our broken little family. At first, I was grateful for how she organized our chaotic household, implemented systems where there had been only grief-stricken disorder. But I soon realized the systems were designed to benefit her and Luke, not me. Luke was 3 years older than me and had always treated our house like a hotel, somewhere to sleep and get free meals while contributing nothing. His father had been some wealthy businessman who'd moved overseas and remarried, sending occasional checks but showing little interest in his son. Perhaps that's why Carol was so determined to give Luke everything, to compensate for his father's emotional abandonment. But her compensation came at my expense. I grabbed my phone and texted my best friend Lily. Need to talk. Breakfast tomorrow? Then I started searching online for information about legal rights, financial fraud, and family law. By morning, I had a plan. At the lawyer's office, the next morning, after meeting Lily and telling her everything, I called a local lawyer whose name I found on a flyer at the library. Mr. Peterson turned out to be a patient man in his late 40s with kind eyes and a direct manner that I appreciated. I need to know if there's anything I can do, I told him, explaining the situation. It's my savings. I worked for it. Can I get it back? Possibly, he said, his voice calm and professional. If you can prove the money was yours and that she used it without your consent, you have a case. But it won't be easy. Are you prepared to go to court? I hesitated, thinking about what this would mean for my already strained family dynamics. Taking my stepmother to court felt drastic. But what choice did I have? Carol wasn't going to admit she was wrong, and my father clearly wasn't going to intervene. My mother died when I was 10. I found myself saying, unsure why I was sharing this with a stranger. Before she got sick, we used to talk about me becoming a nurse. That money was for nursing school. Mr. Peterson nodded, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes we have to fight for the things that matter, even when it's difficult. Yes, I said finally, straightening my shoulders. I'm prepared. Family friction. When I told my father about the lawsuit, he was horrified. Emma, do you really want to do this? He asked, pacing the living room. It's just going to cause more tension in the family. I stared at my father, really seeing him for perhaps the first time. The slumped shoulders, the permanent furrow between his brows, the way his eyes constantly darted to the door as if checking for Carol's arrival. When had he become so diminished? So afraid? I remembered a different father, the one who had taught me to ride a bike, who had held me through the night when Mom first got sick, who had been our family's strength. That man had gradually disappeared after Carol entered our lives, replaced by this anxious shadow always seeking approval. She already caused tension. I shot back. Dad, she stole from me. This isn't about family. It's about what's right. His shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I thought he might side with me. But then Carol walked in, her face a mask of irritation. So, what's the plan, Emma? She sneered. You're going to drag your family through the mud over a few thousand? Real mature. It's not just a few thousand, I said, my voice shaking but steady. It's my future, and I won't let you take that from me. Her lips curled into a smirk. Do what you have to do, sweetheart. You won't win. There was such certainty in her voice, such dismissal. I realized she had never seen me as a threat, never considered me worthy of respect. I was just an inconvenient appendage to her new life with my father. That was the moment I knew there was no turning back. Carol thought she could intimidate me into backing down, but she underestimated just how much my mother's daughter I truly was. The legal battle. With Mr. Peterson's help, I filed the lawsuit and started gathering evidence. Bank statements, pay stubs, anything that proved the money was mine. It wasn't just about the $8,000 anymore. It was about standing up for myself, about refusing to let someone else dictate my worth. Carol had stolen more than my savings. She'd stolen my trust, and I was determined to get it back. The weeks leading up to the trial were tense. My father avoided me, retreating to his workshop whenever I was home. Carol, on the other hand, went out of her way to antagonize me, leaving passive-aggressive notes on the fridge like, maybe save up again. Third time's the charm. Despite the tension at home, I found solace in my friends. You're doing the right thing, Lily assured me during one of our late-night coffee runs. She had no right to take your money. But what if I lose? I asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at me. You won't lose, Lily said firmly. You've worked too hard for this. And even if it doesn't go your way, you're standing up for yourself. That's what matters. As the court date approached, Mr. Peterson uncovered something unexpected in the financial records he subpoenaed. There are inconsistencies in Carol's spending, he explained during our final meeting. Large withdrawals from joint accounts with your father, luxury purchases he knew nothing about. This changes things. It's not just about your savings anymore. It could expose a pattern of financial mismanagement. The revelation left me reeling. I'd always known Carol was self-serving, but this was another level entirely. I debated whether to include this evidence. It would strengthen my case, but it would devastate my father. I don't know if I can do this to him, I confessed to Lily the night before the hearing. She squeezed my hand gently. Emma, he deserves to know the truth. He's been living in her shadow for too long. Courtroom truth. The morning of the trial arrived with a sense of finality. Carol sat across the courtroom, looking calm and polished, her perfectly styled hair and expensive jewelry making her seem untouchable. My father sat beside her, his expression a mixture of confusion and unease. He didn't even look at me. As the evidence unfolded, my bank statements, the note I'd written to Carol about investing my money, and finally the records showing her pattern of financial misdeeds, the atmosphere in the courtroom changed. A hush fell over the room when Mr. Peterson presented the financial record showing Carol's years of siphoning money from my father's accounts for personal luxuries. I glanced at my father as this evidence was presented. His face paled, and he leaned back in his chair, eyes wide with disbelief. For the first time since I'd known her, Carol looked genuinely rattled, her usual superiority crumbling under the weight of exposed truths. When it was my turn to speak, I addressed the judge directly, thinking of my mother with every word. That money was my future, I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. I trusted Carol to help me grow it, but instead, she took it for herself. This isn't just about the $8,000. It's about the principle. I deserve justice, and I deserve to be heard. The judge's verdict came like the breaking of a fever, a release of tension that had been building for months. In light of the evidence, I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiff, Miss Williams. Mrs. Williams is ordered to repay the $8,000 in full with interest within 60 days. Furthermore, I recommend a review of the defendant's financial dealings to ensure no further improprieties have occurred. Carol's face hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line. My father's head dropped into his hands, and I felt, for the first time in years, like I could breathe freely. After the verdict, as we left the courtroom, Carol shot me a venomous glare. You'll regret this, Emma, she hissed. But I didn't flinch. For the first time in years, I felt stronger than her. No, Carol, I said, meeting her gaze directly. You'll regret underestimating me. My father caught up with me in the hallway, his face lined with exhaustion and regret. Emma, he began, his voice faltering. I didn't know. I had no idea she was. You didn't want to know, I interrupted, my tone sharp but not unkind. You looked the other way because it was easier than confronting her. But this is what happens when you ignore the truth. He nodded slowly, shoulders slumping in defeat. You're right. I failed you, and I'm sorry. It wasn't the heartfelt reunion I dreamed of, but it was a start. For the first time, I saw my father not as the passive figure who had let me down, but as a man grappling with the consequences of his choices. It didn't excuse what had happened, but it gave me a sense of closure I hadn't expected. That night, I found him in the living room, staring at a photograph I hadn't seen in years, my mother, him, and me at the beach, all smiling, before cancer took her from us. You remind me of her, he said quietly. She would never have let someone walk all over her either. He looked up at me, eyes glistening. I think I forgot how to stand up for anything after she died. It was easier to just go along, until I was going along with things I knew were wrong. I sat beside him, feeling something like forgiveness begin to take root. It's not too late to remember, Dad. New beginnings. Carol moved out a week later, leaving a curt note. I'll let you know where to send the rest of my things. Luke, predictably, stayed silent. I never heard an apology from either of them, but I realized I didn't need it. I'd fought my battle and won. The $8,000 was officially mine again. It wasn't just money. It was proof that I had taken control of my future. I threw myself into planning for college, researching nursing programs, and figuring out how to stretch every dollar. My father offered to help. I can't make up for what happened, he said one evening as I worked through applications, but I want to support you however I can. I hesitated, unsure if I could trust his offer after everything. But then I saw the sincerity in his eyes. He was trying, and that mattered. Thank you, Dad, I said, surprised by how much I meant it. A few months later, I stood outside my dorm building, staring up at the red brick walls that would house my next chapter. It felt surreal to finally be here after everything I'd been through. My dad had insisted on helping me move in, hovering by the door as I unpacked. Are you sure you don't need anything else? He asked for the fifth time. I smiled, recognizing the question for what it was. Not just about dorm supplies, but about our relationship. I'm good, Dad. Thanks for everything. He hesitated, then nodded. I'm proud of you, Emma. You've worked so hard for this. Hearing those words made my throat tighten. They didn't erase the past, but they showed me he was trying, and that meant something. As I settled into my new life, I thought about what this journey had taught me. I'd always been the quiet one who avoided conflict, but standing up to Carol had shown me I was stronger than I'd ever given myself credit for. I wasn't just a waitress or a forgotten stepdaughter. I was someone who could fight for her future. One weekend, Lily came to visit, and we sat on a campus bench, drinking overpriced coffee. You're killing it, Emma, she said, bumping my shoulder. After everything that happened, you're thriving. Her words stayed with me. For so long, I'd been defined by how others saw me, Carol's dismissiveness, my father's inaction, Luke's indifference. But now, for the first time, I wasn't living in their shadow. I was walking my own path, one that would lead to fulfilling the promise I'd made to my mother years ago. As I walked back to my dorm that evening, I glanced up at the sky, imagining my mom looking down on me. I'm doing it, Mom, I whispered. I'm becoming a nurse. The kind that makes you proud. This wasn't just the resolution of a chapter. It was the beginning of something new. My life was mine, and I was finally ready to live it. I wish you were my son, he said quietly, his eyes meeting mine with a sincerity that made my blood freeze in my veins. In that moment, the conference room seemed to collapse around me. The ticking wall clock, the polished mahogany table, the skyline view of downtown, all of it faded away. There was only his face, the face that had haunted my nightmares for 24 years, and those 6 words that finally shattered the professional wall I'd built. My brother Benjamin shifted uncomfortably beside him, rolling his eyes with that familiar arrogant smirk I'd come to despise over the past 3 months of working with them. Neither of them knew who I really was. Neither of them recognized the 6-year-old girl they'd abandoned at Oak Ridge Children's Home on a cold October morning. I took a breath, steadying my trembling hands beneath the table. This was it, the moment I'd rehearsed in my mind 1,000 times since discovering they would be my clients. "I'm not your son," I said, my voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. "And you gave up the privilege of having me as your daughter the day you left me at that orphanage." The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. Benjamin's smirk vanished, replaced by wide-eyed confusion. For 24 years, I had imagined this moment, but nothing prepared me for the raw reality of finally saying those words aloud. 3 months earlier, Harrison Construction. I stared at the case file on my desk, my fingers frozen on the manila folder. The coffee I'd been drinking turned bitter in my mouth. "Did you say Harrison Construction?" Janet, my assistant, nodded. "Mr. Peterson assigned it personally. Said it needs our best corporate restructuring attorney, and that's you." She gave me a curious look. "Is something wrong?" I forced a smile. "No, nothing. Just surprised by the scope." I kept my voice casual, professional. "When's the initial consultation?" "Tomorrow at 10. She placed the preliminary documents on my desk. "Apparently, they're in serious trouble, multiple lawsuits, contract breaches. Mr. Harrison and his son will be here." After she left, I pulled out my phone and with shaking hands, found the photograph I kept hidden in a password-protected folder. It was the only image I had of my birth family, scanned from the original I discovered during my search 10 years ago. A newspaper clipping from the business section. "Harrison Construction celebrates 25th anniversary." There they were. My father, Charles Harrison, looking stern and important. My mother, Elizabeth, elegant but somehow sad around the eyes. And my brother Benjamin, maybe 17 then, with that entitled expression already forming. I was absent, of course. By then, I'd been erased from their family narrative for over a decade. Why now? I whispered to the empty office. After all these years, after all I'd accomplished, Harvard Law, making partner by 30, building my own family, why did my past have to crash back into my life now? I should recuse myself. That would be the ethical thing, the professional thing. But something deeper and more primal took hold. Maybe, after all this time, this was my chance to finally prove my worth to the family that had thrown me away. First meeting. The conference room felt too small and airless as I waited for them. My navy suit, the one Mark called my power armor, suddenly felt restrictive. I'd spent the night reviewing their case files instead of sleeping, memorizing every detail, every failure, every mistake they'd made. Their company was in serious trouble. Multiple lawsuits from contractors, unsafe working conditions, breach of contracts. Years of negligence and arrogance had finally caught up with Harrison Construction. When they walked in, I almost expected some cosmic recognition, a flicker of awareness in my father's eyes, perhaps. But there was nothing. To him, I was just another lawyer, a stranger hired to clean up his mess. "Danielle Morgan," I introduced myself, extending my hand across the polished table. My father's grip was firm but distracted, his eyes already scanning the room as if looking for someone more important. Benjamin's handshake was limp, disinterested. "Let's get right to it," I said, opening my folder. "Your company is on the verge of collapse." My father's expression hardened. "That's an overstatement. We've weathered downturns before. This isn't a downturn, Mr. Harrison. It's a catastrophic failure of management and oversight." I laid out the documents one by one. "You have 4 active lawsuits, including a serious workplace injury claim that could bankrupt you if it goes to trial. Your contracts are poorly drafted, leaving you exposed. And your finances." I paused, meeting his eyes directly. "Frankly, they're a disaster." Benjamin scoffed. "Who do you think you are, talking to us like that?" A memory flashed, my 6th birthday, Benjamin proudly showing off his new bike while I received nothing because girls don't need expensive things. I pushed it away. "I'm the person you hired to save your company," I replied evenly. "And if you want me to succeed, I need honesty from everyone in this room." My father studied me, his expression unreadable. I wondered if some part of him, some unconscious corner of his mind, recognized something familiar in my face. My mother's eyes, perhaps, or the stubborn set of my jaw that mirrored his own. "Fine," he said finally. What do you suggest? I outlined my strategy, keeping my voice professional despite the turmoil inside. Every recommendation I made was calculated not just to save their company, but to show him, exactly what he had thrown away. Night reflections. That night, after putting our daughter Lily to bed, I found Mark waiting in the kitchen with a glass of wine and that concerned look I knew too well. "You're taking their case," he said. "Not a question." I nodded, accepting the wine. "I have to, Danny." He took my free hand, his thumb tracing my wedding band. "Are you sure this is healthy?" "After everything they did." "That's exactly why," I interrupted, the words spilling out faster than I intended. "All these years, I've built this life, this career, trying to prove something to people who didn't even care enough to keep me. And now they've walked right into my office, needing me to save them. Don't you see? It's almost." I searched for the word. "Poetic justice?" he offered. I smiled faintly. "Something like that." Mark had been my rock since law school. He understood my drive, my perfectionism, my need to excel, all rooted in that abandoned 6-year-old's desperate need to be worthy of keeping. He'd never met my birth family, but he hated them with a quiet, steady passion for what they'd done to me. "Just promise me something," he said, pulling me close. "Don't lose yourself in this. Whatever happens with them, whatever closure you're seeking, remember who you are now. Remember what matters." I rested my head against his shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent. "I know what matters," I whispered, thinking of Lily sleeping upstairs. "They can never take that away from me." But as I lay awake that night, memories I thought long buried resurfaced with painful clarity. My mother's face as she led me into the orphanage, her eyes avoiding mine. "It's just for a little while," she'd said, her voice trembling with what I now recognized as guilt, not sadness. "Be a good girl." My father hadn't even come inside. He'd stayed in the car, too cowardly to face the daughter he was discarding. I'd waited by the window every day for months, certain they would return. They never did. The shifting dynamic. Over the following weeks, something unexpected began to happen. As I guided them through the legal minefield they'd created, my father's attitude toward me gradually shifted. The dismissive tone softened. He began to listen, really listen, when I spoke, occasionally nodding with something that looked almost like respect. Simultaneously, his patience with Benjamin visibly frayed. My brother's defensive excuses and lack of accountability, traits my father had apparently indulged for decades, seemed to suddenly grate on him. "If you'd been paying attention to the details from the start, we wouldn't be in this mess," he snapped during one meeting, cutting Benjamin off mid-excuse. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, a complicated mix of emotions churned. There was a bitter satisfaction in seeing my father finally recognize Benjamin's failings, yet also a strange, unwanted empathy for my brother. I remembered the crushing weight of our father's expectations and disappointments all too well. After the meeting, I found Benjamin alone in the hallway, staring out the window with uncharacteristic stillness. "He's always been like that," I said, surprising myself by initiating conversation. Benjamin glanced at me, something vulnerable briefly visible beneath his arrogance. "Not with me. Not until now." He turned back to the window. "Growing up, he was different. More patient, I guess. But ever since Mom died last year," he trailed off. The news of my mother's death, delivered so casually, hit me like a physical blow. I'd imagined confronting her someday too, asking why she hadn't fought for me, why she'd let him send me away. Now I never would. "I'm sorry about your mother," I managed, the words feeling strange on my tongue. He shrugged. "Cancer. It was quick, at least." He paused. "You remind me of her sometimes. The way you don't let him bulldoze you." The comparison sent an electric jolt through me. Did some part of him recognize me on some level? Or was it just coincidence? Before I could respond, he straightened, armor back in place. "Anyway, I should go. Dad's waiting." I watched him walk away, thinking about the parallel lives we led. Him raised in privilege, but under our father's critical eye, me abandoned but free to become my own person. I wondered, not for the first time, if he knew about me at all, if they'd ever told him he had a sister. The mother's secret happened during week 6 of the restructuring. I was reviewing old company records in a dusty storage room when I found it, a small leather address book tucked between financial ledgers. My mother's elegant handwriting filled the pages. I nearly set it aside until a business card slipped out. Callahan Investigations. On the back, in her hand, read Danielle, continued search. My heart pounded as I flipped through the book, eventually finding entries that made my breath catch. Oak Ridge, no records released. St. Catherine's Academy, dead end. Harvard Law, promising lead. She had been looking for me. Recently, persistently. Tucked into the back cover was a sealed envelope addressed to me, never sent. With trembling fingers, I opened it. My dearest Danielle, it began. If you're reading this, I've finally found you. There is so much to explain, so many years to account for. What your father did, what I allowed him to do, is unforgivable. I told myself it was temporary, just until his business stabilized, until his parents passed and couldn't influence him. I told myself many things to sleep at night. But the weeks became months, and months became years, and the lie became too big to undo. I sank to the floor, letter clutched against my chest, silent tears streaming down my face. She had looked for me. Too late, too many years wasted. But she had tried. The knowledge didn't heal the wound of abandonment, but it complicated my narrative in ways I wasn't prepared for. That night, I showed Mark the letter, watching his expression change as he read. She was going to tell him she'd found you, he said finally, pointing to a passage. She was building up the courage. And then she died, I whispered, and took the truth with her. He looked at me with gentle eyes. Does this change what you want to do? I considered the question, genuinely unsure. The clear line between villain and victim had blurred. My mother had been complicit in my abandonment, but had apparently spent years regretting it and trying to make amends. My father, had he known about her search? Had he forbidden it? Or remained willfully ignorant? I still need the truth, I said finally. All of it. But maybe. I hesitated. Maybe the ending doesn't have to be what I imagined. The revelation. It all came to a head on the day of our final meeting. The restructuring was complete, the lawsuits settled or in mediation, the contracts rewritten, new compliance protocols in place. Harrison Construction would survive, though significantly diminished. My father and Benjamin were already seated when I entered. For the first time since our initial meeting, my father stood briefly as I approached, a small gesture of respect that would have meant the world to me once. I think we all owe you our thanks, he said, his voice gruff as I took my seat. You've done extraordinary work. Benjamin crossed his arms, clearly less enthusiastic. Let's not get carried away. We're not out of the woods yet. I ignored him, focusing on the documents before me. No, you're not, I agreed. But you're on the right track. This restructuring has given you a fighting chance if you follow through. I outlined the final steps they would need to take after our professional relationship ended. My father listened intently, nodding occasionally. I could tell he was genuinely impressed with my work, and the irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter he discarded had become the savior of his precious company. As I began gathering my documents to conclude the meeting, Benjamin leaned back with a familiar sneer. Well, I guess even a blind squirrel finds a nut sometimes. Before I could respond, my father slammed his hand on the table. Enough, Benjamin. His face flushed with anger. That's enough from you. Benjamin looked startled, unused to being the target of his father's disapproval. My father turned to me, his expression softening in a way I'd never witnessed before. His next words changed everything. I wish you were my son, he said quietly. The room went silent save for the ticking of the clock. 24 years of pain, of questions, of striving to prove my worth, all of it crystallized in this moment of bitter validation. He valued me, respected me, but still couldn't see past his own prejudices. I stood slowly, no longer able to maintain the charade. I'm not your son, I said, my voice steady but resonant with emotion. And you gave up the privilege of having me as your daughter the day you left me at that orphanage. The color drained from his face. Benjamin's confusion was total, his eyes darting between us as he struggled to process my words. You didn't even have the courage to come inside, I continued, years of suppressed words finally breaking free. You made mom do it alone. I waited by that window for months, watching for your car. I thought you'd come back when you realized your mistake. But you never did. What is she talking about? Benjamin asked, his voice uncharacteristically small. I turned to him. They didn't tell you? About the daughter they abandoned? The one who wasn't worth keeping because she couldn't carry on the precious Harrison name? Recognition dawned slowly in his eyes. There were rumors. Grandma once mentioned, but Dad always said it was nonsense. My father seemed unable to speak, his hands gripping the table edge. When he finally found his voice, it was hardly more than a whisper. Danielle. He spoke my name as if testing it, searching my face with new eyes. When did you? I made partner at Morgan and Peterson 3 years ago, I interrupted. When Janet assigned me your case, I should have recused myself. But I needed to know if you would recognize me at all. A bitter laugh escaped me. You didn't. I took a breath, steadying myself. I found Mom's notes. Her investigation files. She was looking for me. My father's eyes widened. He stopped, something like shame crossing his features. I didn't know. Of course you didn't, I said. You never wanted to know. It was easier to pretend I never existed. Benjamin stood suddenly. I had a sister all this time, and you never told me? His voice cracked with unexpected emotion. All those years I thought I was alone with you and your impossible standards. He broke off, turning to me with eyes that reminded me painfully of my own. Did you know about me? Growing up? I nodded. I knew I had a brother. I used to imagine what you were like, whether you would have stood up for me if you'd been older when it happened. Something passed between us then, a moment of connection, of shared understanding about the man who had shaped both our lives so profoundly. I turned back to my father. I saved your company, I said, my voice firm and unwavering. Not for you, but because I needed to prove to myself, not to you, that I could rise above what you did to me. I gathered my belongings, emotions surprisingly steady now that the truth was finally spoken. We're done now. The firm will send your final invoice. As I reached the door, my father's voice stopped me. Danielle. There was a rawness to it I'd never heard before. I was wrong. About everything. I turned, studying the broken man before me. For so long, I'd imagined this moment as a triumph, a final victory in a battle he didn't even know we were fighting. Instead, I felt a complex mixture of vindication, grief, and unexpectedly, a strange sense of release. Yes, I said simply. You were. I left then, walking past the offices where I'd built my career, past colleagues who had no idea of the personal revolution that had just occurred. Outside, the spring air felt cleansing, as if I'd emerged from a long hibernation. Epilogue. Mom? Lily's voice pulled me from my reverie. Is he really my grandfather? 3 weeks had passed since the revelation. I looked across our backyard at my daughter, so perfect at 7 years old, so secure in her place in the world. Mark stood by the grill, watching our conversation with supportive eyes. Biologically, yes, I answered carefully. Whether he'll be a grandfather to you in any real sense, that's complicated. Benjamin had reached out the day after our confrontation, his tentative text message opening a door I wasn't sure I wanted to walk through. We'd met for coffee twice since then, awkward, halting conversations as we tried to make sense of our shared history and separate experiences. My father had sent a formal letter, delivered by courier. 6 pages of explanation, justification, and finally, in the last paragraph, a simple apology. Too little, too late. Yet something in me couldn't completely dismiss it. I'd like to meet him, Lily said, with the directness only children possess. And Uncle Benjamin. I've never had a grandfather or an uncle before. Mark joined us, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. That's up to your mom, sweetheart. It's her decision. I looked at my daughter, this miracle who had shown me what unconditional love truly meant, and saw myself at her age, waiting by that orphanage window. The cycle of pain could end with me. It had to. We'll see, I said finally. Maybe someday. Later, as Mark and I cleaned up after dinner, he asked the question I'd been asking myself. Do you think you'll ever forgive him? I considered this, washing a plate with methodical care. Forgiveness isn't a moment, I said slowly. It's a process. I'm starting to realize it might be more for me than for him. He nodded, understanding as always. I don't need him to be my father anymore, I continued. I built a life without him. But maybe. I looked through the window at Lily, reading peacefully on the porch swing. Maybe there's room for something new. Something with boundaries and expectations that I get to set this time. Mark smiled, drying his hands before embracing me. That sounds like the Danielle Morgan I married. Always finding the path forward. I leaned into his embrace, thinking about the long journey from that abandoned little girl to the woman I was now, a wife, a mother, a successful attorney, and finally, the author of my own story. The pain of the past would always be part of me, but it no longer defined me. Tomorrow, I would call Benjamin. Maybe in time, I would even meet with my father. Not for his redemption, but for my peace. The future, with all its complications and possibilities, was mine to shape. And for the first time since finding that case file with the Harrison name, I felt truly, completely free. I'm done. Those two words hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. My suitcase stood packed by the doorway, a declaration of surrender or perhaps victory. I wasn't sure which anymore. Beatrice's face had hardened into that mask of disapproval I'd grown so familiar with over these past 3 weeks, but for once, I didn't feel the sting. My name is Clara Mason. I'm 32, a nurse, and until 5 minutes ago, I was the devoted caregiver to my recovering mother-in-law. Now I was something else, a woman who had finally reached her breaking point. Emily would never abandon me like this, Beatrice said, her voice glacial with disappointment. Emily isn't here, I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. She's never here for more than an hour. I've been the one taking care of you. But if you think she can do better, then fine. I'm done. As I grabbed the handle of my suitcase, 3 weeks of sleepless nights, canceled plans, and endless criticism suddenly lifted from my shoulders. I hope she can give you what you need, I said quietly, because I won't be back. Good, she said with disdain. I won't miss the complaining. At least Emily knows how to show respect. Without another word, I turned and walked out, my chest tight but my head held high. How had it come to this? How had I gone from hoping to finally build a bridge with my mother-in-law to walking out her front door, vowing never to return? Flashback, the beginning. When Beatrice's hip surgery was scheduled last month, I was the first to offer help. Ben, my husband of 5 years, wanted to be there too, but his architectural firm was in the middle of their biggest project to date. I can't get away right now, Clara, he'd explain, his face creased with guilt. Mom needs someone, and you're the best at this care stuff. Behind his words, I heard the unspoken truth. Ben had always been caught between his mother's expectations and his own life. Growing up as the only son of a demanding English teacher had shaped him into the peacekeeper he was, always finding the path of least resistance. His father had been gentle but distant, leaving Beatrice to be the driving force in their family. When Mr. Mason passed away 10 years ago, it had somehow intensified Beatrice's grip on her children, especially Ben. I'll do it, I told him, squeezing his hand. Maybe this will finally give your mom and me a chance to connect. Ben had kissed my forehead, relief washing over his features. You're amazing, you know that? Mom can be challenging, but she'll appreciate this. I know she will. I should have recognized the uncertainty in his voice. At Beatrice's house day one, my first day at Beatrice's had been deceptively promising. She'd been groggy from pain medication, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. As I helped her settle into her bed, she'd looked up at me with something almost like gratitude. Thank you, Clara, she'd murmured before drifting off to sleep. That night, I'd called Ben with hopeful excitement. I think this might work, I'd whispered. She seems softer somehow. But as the medication wore off over the next few days, so did any warmth between us. The Beatrice I knew, critical, demanding, perpetually disappointed, returned with full force. Looking back, I wonder if I'd been naive to think a surgery would change years of entrenched behavior. Beatrice had been a high school English teacher for 30 years, known for her strict standards and uncompromising assessments. She'd brought that same exacting eye to her home life, to her children, and now to me. The kitchen present day, earlier, careless, Beatrice had called me this morning. The word had sliced through me as I stood stirring soup at her stove, my hands cramping from the night before when I'd been up every 2 hours to help her reposition. The wooden spoon had trembled in my grip as I fought back words I knew I'd regret. 3 weeks of giving everything I had, and all she could see was that I hadn't added enough salt to the soup. My throat felt dry, and the words I wanted to say caught like thorns in my chest. Beatrice turned back to the table, muttering something under her breath, her disapproval settling over the room like a heavy fog. Emily, of course, was nowhere to be found. She was already running late for her weekly appearance, and yet Beatrice spoke of her as if she were the one standing here, ladle in hand, taking care of her every need. My parents had raised me to respect my elders, to put others first. Dad had worked double shifts at the factory for 20 years to put me through nursing school, and Mom had never complained about the sacrifices they made. That's what family does, she'd always said. Perhaps that's why I tried so hard with Beatrice. I wanted to honor what my parents had taught me about care and respect. But this was something else entirely. I had given up everything for the past 3 weeks, canceled plans, traded shifts, even missed my anniversary dinner with Ben, all to be here. And for what? To be labeled careless because I hadn't added enough salt to the soup? Meanwhile, Emily could float in for an hour, snap a selfie by Beatrice's bedside, and walk out with all the credit. Emily's visit, the catalyst. Just as I opened my mouth to defend myself, the front door creaked open, and Emily strolled in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "Smells good in here," she chirped, holding a bouquet of flowers in one hand and her phone in the other. She never arrived during the difficult moments, the bath times, the medication struggles, the late night discomfort. She appeared when Beatrice was at her most presentable, when the house was tidy, when dinner was nearly ready. "How's my favorite patient today?" she cooed, leaning down to kiss her mother on the cheek. Beatrice's face lit up, her earlier frustration with me vanishing like a puff of smoke. "Emily, sweetheart, you're just in time." I was telling Clara how important it is to pay attention to the little things. Not that she'd understand, she added with a pointed glance in my direction. Emily set the flowers on the counter and let out a soft laugh. "Oh, Mom, I'm sure Clara's doing her best," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Don't worry, Clara. Taking care of Mom isn't easy. I've been learning that myself." Learning that herself? Emily had visited for exactly 45 minutes last week and spent most of that time taking photos for her Instagram. I'd seen the posts, precious moments with Mom #family care #devotion, accompanied by carefully angled shots that didn't show the medication organizers I'd set up, or the schedule I'd created, or any evidence of the actual care I provided. Emily had mastered the art of pleasing Beatrice. A quick visit, a few photos for social media, and she was the perfect daughter. While Ben had developed empathy, Emily had perfected performance. Their father's death had affected them differently. Ben sought connection, while Emily seemed to seek only approval. I clenched my jaw as Emily pulled her phone out for what I knew was coming next. She posed next to Beatrice, leaning in with a radiant smile as her camera clicked. "Just want to capture these precious moments," she said, her voice light, as if she hadn't just stolen the spotlight from everything I'd been working tirelessly to hold together. As Emily scrolled through her phone, probably selecting the best filter to enhance her devoted daughter persona, Beatrice sighed contentedly. "It's so nice to have both my girls here," she said, her gaze lingering on Emily. Though I'll admit, Emily always knows just how to make me feel special. My grip tightened on the ladle, the weight of her words pressing down on me. Both her girls. I had spent the last 3 nights waking up every 2 hours to help Beatrice shift positions, prepare her medication, and ensure she was comfortable. Meanwhile, Emily's contribution amounted to curated snapshots and vague reassurances that she was always thinking of Mom. "Mom," Emily began, her tone casually breezy, "I was actually thinking of bringing you that herbal tea you love next week, you know, the one from that little shop downtown. It's just been so busy at work, but I'll make time." "Oh, Emily, that sounds wonderful," Beatrice exclaimed, her eyes practically glowing with pride. "You're always so thoughtful." I couldn't stop myself this time. Thoughtful? I blurted, my voice sharper than I intended. She drops by once a week to take a few photos and then disappears. I've been here every single day, doing everything I can to make sure you're comfortable. Emily's smile didn't falter. If anything, it grew wider, but her eyes flashed with something colder. Clara, she said, her voice calm and measured. I didn't realize this was a competition. We're all doing our part in our own way. Some more than others, I muttered under my breath, turning back to the stove. The moment the words left my mouth, regret washed over me. Even though I was right, I hated that I let my frustration spill over, that I'd stooped to making it sound like I was keeping score. It wasn't who I wanted to be, no matter how unfair things felt. In the guest room, the phone call. Later that evening, I slipped into the guest room, shutting the door quietly behind me. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my phone already in my hand. Ben picked up on the second ring, his voice warm but distracted. Hey, everything okay? No, I said, the word tumbling out before I could stop it. I'm exhausted, Ben. I've been doing everything for your mom, everything, and she doesn't even notice. Emily walks in for 10 minutes with flowers and a fake smile, and suddenly she's the perfect daughter. Ben sighed heavily on the other end. Clara, you know how my mom is. She's always been like this. You can't take it personally. I know she's like this, I snapped, my voice sharper than I meant. But that doesn't make it easier. Do you have any idea what it feels like to be here day in and day out and still be invisible? I just, I stopped, swallowing the lump in my throat. I just needed you to understand. Ben's voice softened, a hint of concern cutting through his usual practicality. Clara, maybe it's time to take a break. You've done more than enough. You've done everything, honestly. Why don't you come home for a week? Let Emily step up for once. I miss you, and you need to take care of yourself too. His words caught me off guard, the knot in my chest loosening slightly. The thought of going home, of sleeping in my own bed and being with Ben, was so tempting it almost hurt. But then I thought of Beatrice, her frailty, her stubbornness, and the nagging guilt in my stomach returned. I don't know, I said quietly. What if she needs me? She'll manage, Ben said firmly. You've been more than generous, Clara. It's okay to step back. You're not a bad person for putting yourself first for once. Ben and I lived 2 hours away in a small apartment we'd made our home over the last 5 years. When Beatrice's surgery was scheduled, I'd offered to move in temporarily to help with her recovery. Ben had wanted to be there too, but his job was at a critical point with deadlines he couldn't ignore. He'd called every day to check in, always asking how I was holding up, but I knew it weighed on him that he couldn't be here to share the burden. As much as I missed him, I couldn't blame him. He was doing the best he could, just like I was. I'll think about it, I said quietly, my throat tightening. I promise. It felt like the right thing to say, even though I wasn't sure if I could really let myself walk away. After we hung up, I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The guest room was small but neat, with floral wallpaper that had probably been fashionable 20 years ago. There was nothing personal about it, nothing that reflected me or made me feel welcome. Just like my role in this house, functional but ultimately interchangeable in Beatrice's eyes. The breaking point, next morning. The next morning, I found Beatrice in the living room, sitting upright in her chair with the television on low. She didn't look up as I entered, her attention fixed on a weather report. I hesitated, wondering if I should start the conversation with a simple good morning. But before I could speak, she turned to me with a pointed look. Clara, she said, her tone already laced with irritation. I couldn't help but notice how late dinner was last night. It's not good for my digestion to eat that late, you know. I blinked, taken aback. Dinner was ready as soon as Emily left. I thought we agreed. Yes, because you didn't have it prepared earlier, she interrupted, her words sharp. When Emily is here, everything feels more put together. She doesn't need to be told what to do. I clenched my hands at my sides, biting back the words I wanted to say. Emily stayed for less than an hour, I replied carefully. She didn't even stay for dinner. That's not the point, Beatrice snapped, leaning forward slightly. Emily knows how to handle herself. She doesn't wait for me to tell her when or how to do things. She's considered. I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the same constriction that appeared whenever Beatrice began one of her comparisons. It reminded me of my first dinner at her house 6 years ago when she'd spent the entire meal talking about Emily's accomplishments while barely acknowledging my presence. Ben had squeezed my hand under the table then, a silent apology. I let out a slow breath, trying to keep my composure. I've been here every day, Beatrice. I've been doing everything I can to make sure you're comfortable. And yet somehow it always feels like a struggle. She shot back, her voice growing colder. You're here physically, Clara, but emotionally you're checked out. You don't seem like you actually want to be here. Her words struck like a blow, my chest tightening further. That's not fair, I said, my voice trembling despite my efforts to stay calm. I've put my life on hold to be here for you. I've been sacrificing. She cut in, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Oh, how noble of you. If it's such a burden, Clara, maybe you should have just let Emily handle it. She's busy, yes, but at least she doesn't make me feel like I'm an inconvenience. I opened my mouth, then closed it, unsure of how to respond. The hurt and anger bubbled inside me, but I knew saying anything more would only make it worse. Instead, I straightened my voice, quiet but firm. I'm doing my best, Beatrice. I'm sorry if that's not enough. She waved a hand dismissively, turning back to the television. Your best isn't what I need, Clara. Emily understands me in ways you never will. The room felt suffocating, her words hanging in the air like smoke. Without another word, I turned and left, retreating to the guest room to collect myself. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet, not in front of her. The decision. Guest room, sitting on the edge of the guest bed, I stared at the neatly folded clothes in my suitcase, my thoughts swirling. Beatrice's words replayed in my mind, each one digging deeper into the ache that had been building for weeks. No matter how much I gave, how much I tried, it was never enough, and it never would be. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my messages, landing on the last one from Ben. You've done enough, Clara. Please come home. The words felt heavier now, but they also carried a clarity I hadn't wanted to admit before. Ben was right. I had done enough. I'd given up my time, my energy, and my peace of mind to be here, hoping it might make a difference. But nothing I did would ever compare to the pedestal Beatrice had placed Emily on. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for someone who didn't see me, who didn't value what I was giving. I remembered something my nursing supervisor had told me during my first year. You can't pour from an empty cup, Clara. Sometimes the most caring thing you can do is recognize when you need care yourself. I let out a shaky breath, wiping the tears that threatened to spill. It wasn't about giving up. It was about knowing when I'd reached my limit. For my own sanity, I had to stop waiting for Beatrice's approval. I had to go home. I began to pack methodically, folding each item with care. I'd talk to Beatrice one more time, I decided. One last attempt to make her understand. The confrontation returned to opening scene. The air between us was thick, heavy with everything that had been left unsaid. My heart pounded as I stepped forward, determined to finally speak my mind. Beatrice, I began, my voice steady but soft. I need to talk to you. She glanced up briefly, her expression unreadable. If this is about dinner tonight, I'd rather you focus on getting it right than wasting time chatting. My jaw tightened, but I pushed through. No, it's not about dinner. It's about how I've been treated since I got here. Her hand froze mid-stir, and she finally looked at me, one eyebrow arched. Oh? And how exactly have you been treated, Clara? I took a deep breath, the words spilling out before I could second-guess myself. I've been here every day, doing everything I can to take care of you. I've rearranged my life, missed important moments, and given you all of my energy. And yet, no matter what I do, it's never enough. You've made it clear time and time again that you don't value me, and honestly, I'm tired of being treated like I'm worthless. She set her spoon down with a deliberate clink, folding her hands in front of her. Well, she said coolly, if you're tired, Clara, no one's forcing you to stay. Frankly, Emily would do a much better job anyway. She always has. Her words stung sharper than I'd expected, but I refused to let her see how much they hurt. This was the pattern we'd established over years. Beatrice would wound, I would absorb, and nothing would change. But not this time. Emily isn't here, Beatrice, I said, my voice firmer now. She's never here for more than an hour or two. I've been the one taking care of you, but if you think she can do better, then fine. I'm done. Beatrice didn't flinch, her expression hard as stone. Good, she said with disdain. I won't miss the complaining. At least Emily knows how to show respect. I nodded slowly, the finality of her words settling over me like a cold weight. I hope she can give you what you need, I said quietly, because I won't be back. Without waiting for her response, I turned and walked away, my chest tight but my head held high. It was over. I was done. The exit, packing up, back in the guest room, I packed my things with quiet determination. Each folded piece of clothing felt like another weight lifted off my shoulders. Beatrice's cutting words still rang in my ears, but I shoved them aside. It was over. I was done bending myself into knots for someone who didn't value me. Once everything was packed, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone. My thumb hovered over Emily's number before I pressed call. The line rang several times before she finally picked up. What is it, Clara? Emily answered, her tone clipped and impatient. I'm kind of busy right now. I took a deep breath, refusing to let her attitude get to me. I'm leaving, I said simply. I've packed my things, and I'm heading home. Beatrice needs someone here, so congratulations, you're up. What? She snapped, her voice immediately rising. Wait, what are you talking about? You can't just leave. I can, and I am, I said firmly. I've done my part, Emily. It's your turn now. She let out a high-pitched laugh, the kind that came more from disbelief than amusement. Oh, sure. Just drop everything on me. Why don't you? Do you have any idea how busy I am? I can't just. I've been here for weeks, I cut in, my voice steady. You've had time to prepare for this. Mom's your responsibility too, and she seems to think you're better at this anyway. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Are you kidding me? Emily shrieked, her tone growing more frantic. I don't have time to babysit her. That's your thing, Clara. You're the caretaker, not me. There it was. The truth behind the carefully constructed Instagram posts and brief, camera-ready visits. Emily had never intended to actually care for her mother. She just wanted the credit for it. Not anymore, I said, my voice cold. Good luck, Emily. Before she could respond, I hung up, exhaling a shaky breath. I stood, grabbed my suitcase, and headed for the door. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. It was time to leave. The phone call. 4 days later. 4 days had passed since I left, and I had tried my best not to think about what might be happening back at Beatrice's house. But when my phone buzzed late that evening, I saw her name flashing on the screen. A part of me wanted to ignore it, but curiosity and maybe a bit of guilt got the better of me. I picked up. Hello? I said cautiously. Clara, Beatrice's voice came through, shaky and strained. She sounded different, tired, maybe even desperate. I need to talk to you. I hesitated, unsure of what to say. Is everything okay? No, she admitted, the word heavy with frustration and something else I couldn't quite place. Emily hasn't been here since you left. She's barely answering my calls. And when she does, she has some excuse about work or being too busy. She promised me she'd be here. I bit my lip, resisting the urge to say, I told you so. Instead, I stayed quiet, letting her vent. I've had to do everything on my own, Beatrice continued, her voice trembling. I can't even manage the stairs some days. I don't know what to do, Clara. I feel completely abandoned. Her words hit harder than I expected, stirring a mixture of emotions. Sympathy, vindication, and a lingering ache of resentment. She had treated me like I was nothing, and now she was realizing what it meant to truly feel alone. I'm sorry to hear that, Beatrice, I said finally, my tone neutral. But I warned you this might happen. Emily's good at saying the right things, but she's never been the one to follow through. There was a long pause, and for the first time, Beatrice's voice softened. I didn't think she'd just leave me like this. I thought she cared. I stayed silent, not wanting to twist the knife. Beatrice was finally feeling the consequences of her favoritism, and while a small part of me felt justified, another part of me couldn't help but feel sorry for her. I took a deep breath, clutching the phone tightly. Beatrice, I'm sorry you're feeling this way. I wouldn't wish this on anyone. I began, my voice quiet but steady. But I can't just come back, not right now. What do you mean, not right now? She snapped, her tone immediately sharp. I mean, I can't drop everything again to move back in, I said firmly, though my heart ached as I spoke. Beatrice, you treated me like I was nothing when I was there. I gave everything I could, and you made me feel like I didn't matter. I can't put myself through that again. Her response was immediate and furious. Oh, so now you're going to hold a grudge, are you? She yelled, her voice rising. You think you're so perfect, Clara? You think I didn't notice the mistakes you made while you were here? Don't act like you're some martyr. You've never been good enough for this family, and now you're proving it. Her words hit like a slap, but I kept my voice calm. Beatrice, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I know I made mistakes, but I tried. I gave everything I had, and you never saw that. And now, after everything, you expect me to come back as if none of that happened? She let out a bitter laugh, her tone dripping with anger. I should have known. You're just like everyone else, selfish. At least Emily would never abandon me like this. Emily already has, I said quietly, the words hanging in the air. There was a stunned silence on the other end before she exploded again. Don't you dare talk about Emily like that. She has her reasons, unlike you, who's just looking for an excuse to quit. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I'm sorry you feel that way, Beatrice, but I can't come back, not like this. Before she could yell more, I ended the call, my hands trembling. The weight of her words sat heavy on my chest, but I knew I couldn't go back, not now, and maybe not ever. The healing. 5 days passed, and I tried to move on, pushing the memories of Beatrice's anger to the back of my mind. I was starting to feel a sense of peace again, though it was fragile, held together by long walks and conversations with Ben. We talked about what had happened, about the patterns of behavior I'd endured, and about setting healthier boundaries. You did the right thing, Ben had reassured me. Mom needs to understand that she can't treat people that way and expect them to stay. I'd been surprised by his clarity. For years, Ben had been the mediator, the one who smoothed things over when Beatrice's sharp edges cut too deep. Now, he seemed to be seeing his mother's behavior through new eyes, my eyes, perhaps. Then, late in the evening, my phone buzzed. It was her. I stared at the screen for a moment, debating whether to answer. With a deep breath, I picked up. Hello? Clara, Beatrice's voice broke on the other end, shaky and filled with tears. Clara, I'm so sorry. I sat down, stunned. In the 6 years I'd known Beatrice, I'd never once heard her apologize for anything. Her sobs were raw, her words tumbling out in fragments. I I don't know what to say. I've been sitting here thinking about everything, and I can't believe how awful I was to you. You didn't deserve any of it. I I don't even know why I acted like that. You gave so much, and I threw it back in your face. I remained silent, trying to process this sudden transformation. Was it genuine? Or just another manipulation? My guard was up, but something in the vulnerability of her voice gave me pause. I regret it so much, she choked out. Emily hasn't been here in days, and now I see it. I see what you were saying all along. I just, I need you to know how sorry I am. I didn't deserve your kindness, but you gave it anyway. Tears pricked at my eyes, her sincerity cutting through the pain I'd been carrying. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Thank you, Beatrice, I said softly. That means more than you know. I don't expect you to forgive me, she whispered, her voice cracking, but I had to tell you. I'm so sorry. I sat in silence for a moment, letting her words sink in. I'll need time, I said finally, my voice gentle but firm. But I appreciate your apology. It's a start. It is, she said, her sobs quieting. I'll try to do better, Clara. I promise. When the call ended, I set the phone down, my heart heavy, but lighter all at once. For the first time, it felt like there was a path forward, however slow it might be. Flashback, my wedding day. I remembered my wedding day, 5 years ago. Beatrice had cornered me in the small room where I was getting ready. I hope you know what you're doing, she'd said, straightening my necklace with cool efficiency. Marriage isn't just romance and pretty dresses. It's work. I'd nodded, determined not to let her dampen my spirits. I know that, Beatrice. Ben needs someone who understands his ambitions, she continued. Emily's college roommate, the one who's an architect too. She always said Ben had remarkable potential. Even on my wedding day, there it was, the comparison, the implication that someone else would have been better suited. I'd smiled tightly and turned back to the mirror, refusing to engage. Later, during the reception, I'd spotted Beatrice sitting alone, watching the dancing with a glass of champagne in hand. For just a moment, her composed facade had slipped, revealing something I hadn't expected: loneliness. I'd wondered then if her sharp edges were less about cutting others and more about protecting herself. Now, years later, I wondered if her apology meant she was finally ready to lower those defenses. The reconciliation. Weeks later. The weeks that followed were a slow, careful dance of reconciliation. I didn't return to stay at Beatrice's house, but I began to visit, first for an hour, then for an afternoon. Ben came with me sometimes, marveling at the changed atmosphere between his mother and me. Beatrice had hired a part-time caregiver, a no-nonsense woman named Margaret who seemed unperturbed by Beatrice's occasional sharp comments. Water off a duck's back, she told me with a wink. I've been doing this job for 30 years, honey. I've heard it all. On my third visit, Beatrice had asked me to help her sort through old photographs, a task she'd never trusted me with before. As we sat at her dining table, carefully organizing faded images into albums, she'd hesitated over a picture of a young man in a graduation cap and gown. My husband, she'd said softly. Ben looks so much like him sometimes it hurts. I'd nodded, unsure what to say. Beatrice rarely spoke of her late husband. He was the calm one, she continued, her fingers tracing the outline of his face. I was always reactive, too quick to judge, too slow to praise. He balanced me. She looked up then, her eyes meeting mine. After he died, I think I got worse. Harder. Emily learned to manage me. She knows exactly what to say, exactly how to perform to get my approval. Ben tried to fix things, to keep the peace. And you, I just wanted to be accepted, I admitted. To be part of the family. Your family, she'd said quietly. I was just too stubborn to let you in. Those simple words had begun to heal a wound I'd carried for years. Epilogue. The new normal. After Beatrice recovered, everything was different. She treated me with kindness and gratitude, her sharp edges replaced by genuine warmth. Each visit was lighter, filled with moments of connection instead of tension. One afternoon, as we sat on her porch enjoying the spring sunshine, she mentioned Emily's latest social media post, a carefully curated image of mother and daughter enjoying tea. It looks nice, she commented, sipping from her actual teacup. But it's not real, is it? Not like this. I glanced at her, surprised by the insight. No, it's not like this. I used to think appearances were everything, she admitted. The perfect family, the perfect mother, the perfect daughter-in-law. I wanted Emily to be successful because it reflected well on me. I wanted Ben to marry someone impressive for the same reason. She shook her head. How shallow that seems now. What changed your mind? I asked Beatrice. She considered the question, watching a pair of birds dart between the trees. Being truly alone, she said finally. When you left and Emily didn't come, I realized I'd been valuing the wrong things. Appearances fade. Photos get deleted. But kindness. She looked at me then, her eyes clear and direct. Kindness stays. Beatrice went out of her way to show her appreciation now, in small ways that meant more than grand gestures. She remembered my favorite tea, asked about my work, listened when I spoke. And while the past couldn't be erased, it no longer weighed us down. For the first time, I felt truly valued, and that made all the difference. Not because I needed Beatrice's approval anymore, but because we'd both learned something essential about what family really means. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present. It's not about the photos you take. It's about the moments you make. And sometimes, the hardest person to care for is yourself, but it's the most important care of all.